and welcome back to my channel once again. This video is going to be talking about a few of the changes in my plans on how I'm going to deliver this pregnancy. So this is my second pregnancy, this is my second daughter, and my first pregnancy, when I went into labor, things went a little bit wrong. So the first time around, I tried to deliver at a non-medical birth center. I was going for unmedicated birth, I was going for like physiological birth, whatever you want to call it, like the whole natural thing. With my first birth, I went until 42 weeks before going into labor spontaneously, and that was the night before I was going to be induced at the hospital. So I tried to go through a non-medical birth center, and after going into labor, I ended up there because I was still just in time to try to deliver the way I wanted to. I went into labor naturally midnight of that day. So that was going to be the morning that I would have been induced at the hospital. And I called the midwives, I went and I met with them. And labor ramped up really, really quickly for me. It would have been a precipitous labor, a precipitous birth, had I been able to get her out. But unfortunately that didn't happen. I got to the birth center, my water broke, I spent the next 9 hours pushing, and eventually she went into distress and I had to be transferred to the hospital where I had an emergency C-section. So obviously that wasn't the plan the first time around for me to have a C-section, and when I got pregnant this time around I was pretty set on a VBAC at first. I talked to the OB in the Northeast when we were still living there, and they were supportive of the VBAC. They said we'd talk about it as we got closer to the birth, and I mean, we didn't get close enough to really talk about it, I guess. So what ended up happening was when we came to the Midwest, I asked some really specific questions to the new OB who would be delivering my baby over here in the Midwest. And it kind of shed a lot of light on my first birth because I hadn't gotten a whole lot of information about it from the people in the Northeast, given that I was transferred from a non-medical birth center and they didn't really give them any information when they transferred me. And the hospital really just evaluated me, decided what needed to be done, and delivered my baby. I swear to God, every time I make a video, the memory card fills up. But I've taken care of it. Here we go. Back to the story. So I asked my new OB a bunch of different questions about my first labor, and he kind of gave us the information we needed to make a decision on how I wanted to deliver this time. And the questions I asked were about why my labor stalled, kind of. So what had happened during my first birth was my cervix started to swell in one spot after many hours of pushing. And he said that from his experience, that usually indicates that the baby was not fitting through. The baby was not going to fit under the pelvic bone. And then I talked about all the different things that we tried at the birth center. I was walking up and down stairs. I was on all fours. I was squatting. I was sitting on a chair. I was sitting on like a toilet even for some of the labor. And nothing worked and she wasn't coming out. So at that point he was like, well, I'm wondering if maybe your pelvis is too small. And I said, well, what does that mean for this birth? And he said, well, and he was joking with me at this point. He said, well, have you grown an inch in height, or have you grown your pelvis since you last delivered? And I laughed and I said no. And he said, well, it's probably going to be hard to deliver vaginally. And he was still supportive of trying for a VBAC if that's what I wanted, but he said that there would be a higher chance of me ending up where I did last time. So with that information, I kind of just decided to just schedule a C-section so that I can have a really calm birth. I can know when I'm going to deliver, know what her birthday is going to be. I can go in at the time that they've scheduled me for, and I can have my surgery and I can have my baby. I can be the first one to meet her, the first one to hold her, because Gabe is going to be with Pearl. And it's going to be a really very healing experience, I think, for me, given what happened last time where I was put under general anesthesia and woke up and I wasn't pregnant and my baby was nowhere to be found, and I didn't really know where I was at first. I didn't know what was going on, and the recovery should be better given it's not going to be an emergency surgery. I'm not going to be completely exhausted from pushing for 9 hours and a whole labor and a whole mess of that, and I'm not going to be going through a huge trauma like I did last time, because last time I ended up with some pretty serious mental health problems because of the trauma of the birth specifically. And based on what I found out from him this past appointment that I had, I feel like I really did give it my all this last time. And I don't think I am built to birth naturally, so to speak, because I would have if I had been built for it. And for most of that labor, I was not afraid. I wasn't scared, so that wasn't causing me to not dilate or anything. I dilated to a 10. I was told to push. It's not like I wasn't there. So I think I gave it my all. I really genuinely do. I know I gave it my all. And my husband can vouch for that too. And I just think that this is what is best for me and for my mental health and for my baby's safety and for my safety. So that's what we're going to do. I already have it scheduled. I'm not going to share the date just because I want to keep my privacy protected, and I will be delivering in the next 2 months, I will say that. And I'm very excited. I'm super excited to meet my second daughter. Another thing I want to mention is that we did have an ultrasound a few weeks back, and I think I was 34 weeks at the time, and she was measuring 4 weeks ahead. And I know that those are just kind of an estimate and they can be off by 2 pounds on either side, but I'm kind of inclined to believe it, given that before I had Pearl, I had one final ultrasound at like 41 and 5 or something, and she was measuring only 1 ounce off of her birth weight. So it also makes me feel better about having another C-section because it seems like she's going to be an absolutely gigantic baby. And the doctor that we were seeing kept asking, like, did you get tested for GD? Do you have GD? No, I do not have GD. I was tested for GD this pregnancy. I took the 1 hour test and I passed just fine the first try. And same with my last pregnancy. I took the GD test, did the glucola drink, and passed just fine. So there's probably some other reason why my babies are so big, like genetics, especially since my husband is 8 inches taller than me and I'm not very tall to begin with. I'm 5'3". And I hadn't really shared that I was going to try for a VBAC in any of my previous videos because I wanted to make sure that I was solid on my decision before I shared anything. And honestly, if I had tried for a VBAC, I don't think I would have shared that until after the fact, just so I wouldn't feel like there was any kind of a pressure on me to like perform somehow, which sounds so silly, but that's kind of how I felt with my last pregnancy because I shared my due date last time, and then of course when I got to 40 weeks, people who never talked to me, who I knew in real life, would come out of the woodwork and just like message me. And I knew they wanted to know if I'd had the baby yet, but I was just kind of like, no. You would know if I had the baby. Like, I would have said something by now because I've been waiting for so long. And then I went 2 weeks overdue, and of course everyone's waiting for you to have the baby at that point. And it was just kind of a really unpleasant experience, which is why this time around, if anyone were to ask my due date, which luckily no one has, I will not tell them. Or I'll give them a completely bogus answer that's like 6 months in the future. But anyway, that's my update. I'm excited to meet baby girl number 2. And I will see you in the next one. Bye!